Thank you for joining us here for this special interview here on the National Communications Network. My name is Shaquan Gill, and I'm joined by the Senior Minister in the Office of the President with responsibility for finance, Dr. Ashni Singh. And this conversation will surround the impactful and exciting Budget 2024 to hear more about all of the things that are being planned for Monday. Minister, this is going to be the fifth budget passed by the People's Progressive Party civic government. Can you walk us through the consistent mindset that the PPPC government has when preparing these budgets for the fiscal year?
Sure. So thanks a lot again, Shaquan. Like I said, I'm happy that you've chosen to draw attention to the budget and focus on the budget and do a dedicated program on the budget, because I think it really matters that we communicate with the public at large issues surrounding the budget and build greater understanding about the process, greater understanding of the process and the contents and so on. You ask a very interesting question, and in fact, in a way, you partly answered the question, because in framing your question, you used the word the consistent mindset. And I want to use that point, that word, as my departure point in answering you. One of the distinguishing characteristics of this People's Progressive Party civic government, and indeed previous People's Progressive Party civic governments, one of our particular distinctive characteristics is consistency. And in particular, consistency as it relates to philosophical orientation, consistency as it relates to policy priorities and objectives, and consistency as it relates to the programs and projects that we will implement to achieve those policy priorities and objectives. And so our task in government we have consistently seen our task in government as a task whose principal objective is the improvement of the well-being of all Guyanese people. And if you were to dissect everything that we have said and everything that we have done, and every major policy document that we've issued, you will see that the consistent objective underlying all that we have done is the improvement of the well-being of all of the Guyanese people. So, first of all, we are, as a government, methodical in the manner in which we approach policy formulation. We take the time to analyze the global situation because we have to understand the world in which we operate. I see all sorts of reckless statements being made about inflation and inflation of the rest of the world versus inflation in Guyana and so on and so forth. One has to understand the world in which one operates and the manner in which one interacts with the rest of the world, because we are very much a part of a global economic system. And so we in government have always been careful and methodical and analytical in ensuring that we understand the global environment in which we are operating, in which we understand the domestic environment in which we are operating, in which we analyze and anticipate and project economic developments, both globally and domestically, and frame our policy response accordingly. Most importantly, we are firm believers in a consultative approach to policy formulation. unlike the APNU AFC, we don't formulate policies in our conference rooms or in our offices. We listen to people. We have a president who is constantly on the ground listening to people. We have a cabinet that is constantly on the ground listening to people. And in listening to people, we hear what they consider to be most important to them. What are the issues that they consider to be most important to them? And we incorporate those into our policy framework. And thirdly, policy continuity is a hallmark of our government and is something, in fact, that we are proud of, because we don't hop and skip from policy to policy every month or every year. We don't adopt a policy and then abandon it 1 year later, or adopt a policy objective and then abandon it 1 year later. We believe in policy continuity. And policy continuity is important because it's important that your citizens, both corporate and individual, are able to anticipate and predict and understand the environment in which they're operating. An investor who's coming to Guyana wants a predictable policy environment. He doesn't want an uncertain, he or she doesn't want an uncertain or unpredictable policy environment. So with all of that said, to come back to the question that you asked, when we were going to the electorate in 2020, we prepared a manifesto. And we didn't prepare that manifesto sitting in the academic halls of a university or in the boardrooms and conference rooms of our offices. You will recall that the People's Progressive Party, led by its General Secretary, then opposition leader, and its presidential candidate, now president, engaged in a consultation with stakeholders as we prepared our manifesto. You may recall that there was an event held in Providence that led to the manifesto. And so we listened to people in developing a manifesto that incorporated their views, their concerns, and their priorities. And we went to the people of Guyana with that manifesto, offering it almost as a social contract to say, this is what we are committing as a government to implement once elected into office. And the people of Guyana, having looked at that manifesto and having considered also, of course, our track record in implementation and delivery of promises, elected us. And we didn't abandon those manifesto promises, and I'll come back to why that is important. Instead, we set about implementing that manifesto in our successive budgets. In the first budget that we did, Budget 2020, the emergency budget, I had not yet assumed office. In Budget 2020, and then in every subsequent full year budget, the emergency budget of 2020, and I came back in November 2020, and so I had the privilege of presenting Budget 2021 on behalf of our PPP government. And every budget since then has remained faithful to our manifesto. The things that we implement in our budget, successive budgets, are the things we promised in our manifesto and are the things that people voted us into government expecting that we will deliver. Now you may ask why that is important. We operate in a politically competitive environment, and we are a government who believes firmly in democracy and the will of the people. And in a competitive political environment, you have to compare and contrast between political alternatives. If you look at this or any other PPP government over history, you will see that we have remained faithful to our promises. First of all, we don't promise outlandish things. We always promise things that we've analyzed, that are realistic and viable and implementable, and indeed affordable, and that we are committed to implement. So when we make a promise in our manifesto or in our budget, we will implement it. In contrast, you just have to pick up the APNU's manifesto. You could start with their 2015 manifesto, because on the basis of their 2015 manifesto, which incidentally they reluctantly issued, but anyhow, that's a different matter. If you look at their 2015 manifesto, they didn't deliver anything in their manifesto. In fact, the manifesto, their manifesto, the APNU AFC's manifesto, apparently was a document that was only intended to deceive the people. They promised increases in their manifesto to public servants and to old age pensioners, including increases in the first 100 days, to double old age pension, to increase public servants' salaries, sugar workers, increase in salaries for sugar workers. You will recall, whether it was in the manifesto or their election campaign, they promised, I don't know if it was $6,000 a bag for paddy and all sorts of crazy, outlandish things. None of which they delivered. None of which they delivered. And they spent 5 years in government not delivering anything that they promised in their manifesto. If you fast forward to 2020 and look at what they promised in the 2020 election, compared with their various mutterings and utterings now, there's no consistency. If you listen to one of them is calling for ABC. If you listen to another one, they're calling for XYZ. If you listen to one of them today, they're calling for 1, 2, 3. If you listen to the same person tomorrow, they're calling for 5, 6, and 7. And I'm only giving those as, and you can, there is a multitude of examples. If you look over time at what the APNU, first of all, went in 2020 and said to the people of Guyana they will implement when they're in government, compared to all of the outlandish things that they're calling for, all sorts of things. They had 5 years in government. None of those things did they implement or deliver. None of them whatsoever. None of them. When they were in government, their tune was totally different. Our tune is not different in government from when we were in opposition. The things that we said we will do in opposition are the things we said we will do when we get into government. And when we got into government, they're the things that we're implementing. So to come back to your original question, Shakwan, you asked about what guides us. First of all, we are guided by, I suppose I could, at a simplistic way, I could say to you, we are guided by our manifesto, which is what we promised the people of Guyana. But within and embedded in that, we are guided by an abiding and overarching commitment to improve the lives of the people of Guyana.
Minister, you spoke about policy continuity. Can you tell us in what areas we can see that continuation of policies building on Budget 2023 in Budget 2024?
Sure. So I referred earlier to the objective of improving the lives of all Guyanese people. And I went further and said that if you look at all that we have been doing in government, you will see that objective informing what we're doing. And in that regard, I would say to you that in every sector of government operations, there is a consistent approach, and that consistent approach is always aimed at improving people's lives. So, first of all, our emphasis on ensuring an economy that continues to record strong growth and broad-based and diversified growth. That is an objective that is critical to improving well-being. Because economic growth the increase in value-added productive output of the country is premised on increases in investment, increases in consumption, which necessitates in turn a number of interventions to ensure that we're able to maintain a favorable investment environment, maintain an environment that continues to create jobs, maintain an environment that continues to generate incomes, and in particular disposable incomes, and therefore in turn maintain an environment in which more Guyanese people have the capacity and have the disposable income to be consuming goods and services in our economy, which of course then multiplies itself over many times. So maintaining strong economic growth is an important policy objective for us, not because economic growth is an end by itself or in its own right, but because economic growth can translate and does translate into economic well-being and the well-being of communities and households, etc. If you have high levels of investment, you have high levels of job creation, you have business opportunities, you have incomes being earned, you have improved well-being. So maintaining high economic growth. Continued strong investment in infrastructure, in transformative infrastructure, because this is also so critical to long-term economic well-being. So the big infrastructure projects are, of course, valuable and essential for short-term convenience. I mean, if you take transport infrastructure, the roads and bridges and highways and so on that we're building are important for, in the short term, improve commuter convenience, etc. But in the medium and longer term, if you peel off that layer, there's a second layer, and that is that a more modern and integrated transport network also means an environment that is more conducive to investment, because people are better able to set up factories, they're better able to set up warehouses, they're better able to set up commercial office space, because they're easier. All of those things affect the ease of doing business. If you look at the investment in energy infrastructure, the gas-to-shore project that we're building out, the Mila Falls project that we're working again, the solar power plant that we're working on, the solar farms that we're investing in. If you look at energy infrastructure, those things go to the core also of the cost of doing business. They go to the core of the costs that are incurred by households for electricity and the reliability of electricity. So investment in infrastructure is critical not only for well-being in the short term, but investment in infrastructure is also critical for the long-term well-being of the country. And here I'm speaking more about the economic infrastructure, bridges, roads, etc. Investment in social services, because we want every single Guyanese person to be able to enjoy good quality social services, to be able to enjoy good health so that they can have productive and comfortable lives, and good quality education, and so that they can acquire the necessary education and technical skills to be able to play a meaningful role in the economy of tomorrow, to be able to contribute to the realization of better economic outcomes in the medium term, but so that they can also be able to better take care of their families, so that they can be able to get better quality jobs, or that they have the skills that are necessary to become entrepreneurs in their own right and to manage successful businesses, to earn and to better take care of their families. And so investment in social services is absolutely essential, and in particular, public health care and education, which are so essential to economic well-being. Now here again, there's a short-term dimension to that, because good quality healthcare, good quality education, those are things that are important in the short term, but they're also absolutely essential in the longer term, because a healthier population and a better educated population can only redound to the medium and longer term benefit of the country. investing in and protecting our most vulnerable. That's also absolutely essential. And you've seen the work that we have done to restore the support that we provide to the most vulnerable sections of society, whether it's the elderly, whether it's the young, whether it's our populations in the hinterland. There are a number of specific and targeted interventions that we've always been implementing, targeting specific and in particular vulnerable groups to make sure that they are provided with the social safety nets that they need to be able to navigate this period and in particular themselves be able to contribute meaningfully to the economy as we go forward. Even those who are elderly and now pensioners have an important role to play in our country going forward, even if that role is simply to be an active and engaged grandparent. That itself is an important role to play. And so we want to make sure that our elderly are in good health, that they're well taken care of, that they, of course, we've been progressively increasing the old age pension so that they have some amount of disposable income themselves to help to take care of themselves. And all of the other things that are essential to ensure, like I said earlier, that the well-being of people is improved. And so I mentioned these only as a few examples. I mentioned, like I said, economic growth, investment in infrastructure, investment in social services, etc., which are all examples that manifest our commitment to, one, improvement in the well-being of people, but two, continuity in there. Those policy objectives haven't changed. We don't come next year and say a different set of things. They haven't changed. And I want to say too that any one of those, whether you pick infrastructure, so let's pick infrastructure. The build out of community roads, we have been building and upgrading community roads throughout the length and breadth of the country. Now, that's of course a part of the physical transformation of the country. We have better quality roads. But they go to the core of the well-being of people. They go to the core of the well-being of people. I've seen communities where they didn't have a road. Initially, particularly in rural areas, there are many communities where initially the settlement may have originated first as a squatter settlement. It has now gotten regularized because we have an active housing program. Infrastructure is now being put in. Streets are being put in where streets didn't exist before. And I have seen how communities have been transformed from a situation where children some years ago had, when they were going to school, had to take their shoes off because they were walking in potholes and mud dams in many cases. Today, they don't need to do that because they have beautifully paved concrete streets. That goes to the core of the well-being of every single family who is living in that street and every single family who has to use that street. The investment in public health care, being able to deliver better quality health care so that we are all able to be more productive. If you're an adult of working age, being able to manage your medical situation more effectively and more successfully so that you are not ill and you're able to spend longer in productive activity redounds not only to your well-being, but redounds to your family's well-being. The same with education, the same with every other aspect. And so I give those really as examples to make the point that it may look like an investment in a road, but it goes to the core of the well-being of people. It goes to the core of the well-being of people. It may look like an investment in a hospital. And you may think to yourself, well, if I'm not a doctor or I'm not a nurse, what does that have to do with me? Well, it has nothing to do with you until you're ill and need the services of the hospital. And then you'll discover that it has everything to do with your well-being to continue working, your well-being to continue being active in your family, your well-being to continue to be an active member of society, And often it goes to the core of your survival as a human being, making sure that you're able to live and live better and a better quality of life. So it may look initially that, oh, it's a hospital, it has nothing to do with me. But it has everything to do with you. It has everything to do with me. And so that, if you take every single sector, our investment in water and trying to get every home in Ghana to have potable water, we have short memories. There was a time when I recall that if you were going to Berbice, in my living memory, perhaps you're a little bit younger, Shakwan, so you might not remember these times. But there was a time when if you were going to Berbice in the mornings along the road, you would see, not just in Berbice, all East Coast, Demerara, West Berbice, into East Berbice, you would see people pushing carts with water in the mornings or fetching water in the mornings. That was every morning at a particular time, people would be going to a well or wherever water was available nearest. That's a rarity today, because we're delivering increasingly water to every home, and we want to get to that point where we deliver potable water to every home. So you may hear we're investing in a water distribution system or a well in your community, and you may think, well, that doesn't have anything to do with me. It has everything to do with you, because being able to get good quality water in your yard or in your home goes to the core of well-being, And the list goes on. The construction of a technical training college or a technical institute, which will create jobs, will generate businesses, will generate incomes in your community, goes to the core of your well-being. The construction of a stadium or a sporting facility that allows not only big events to be held, but also better quality living, again, goes to the core of your well-being. And so everything that we do, if you were to analyze it, everything that we do in our budget revolves around the objective of improving the lives of every single Guyanese citizen.
Dr. Singh, you spoke about the economic activities that can come and can be derived from these projects. Apart from the economic diversification and social services, a question that may be lingering on the minds of a number of people are the salary increases and the salaries of public servants. I know that the public service is now under your purview. To disabuse the minds of a number of these public servants and to ask on behalf of them, will there be an increase in salary in 2024?
So, we have never used the budget as the vehicle to announce public service salary increases. And 2024 will not break with this tradition. And so we don't announce, the budget does not typically make an announcement that public service salaries will be increased by X or Y. And 2024 will be no different. But I can say equally that we have always consistently ensured that public sector wages increase progressively. We have always delivered a salary increase to public service employees, and in the same manner that the budget will not be announcing a salary increase, I can tell you that in due course during 2024, as we have done in every other year that we have been in government, the appropriate announcement will be made at the appropriate time. But it will not be the annual budget is not the vehicle for this to be done.
Dr. Singh, as we wrap up our conversation for today, I want to ask you very pointedly, as people look forward to Budget 2024 and the announcements and measures that will emanate from Budget 2024, what can you say will be the end result, and what can people expect that will improve their standard of living and quality of life?
Sure. I'm actually glad that you asked that as the closing question, and it's a very important and searching question. It's a very important and searching question. It has to be understood that we are building a new Guyana here. The face of the country is changing as we speak. Whether it's the physical infrastructure, whether it's public infrastructure or privately financed infrastructure, whether it is the services that are available, the face of our country is changing. Like I said, some of this is happening in the public sector with the public investments that we're making, but a lot of it is happening in the private sector too. You're seeing a lot more private companies come to Guyana, set up business, advertise, recruit people, provide new services. It doesn't matter where, if it's transport or food and beverages or whichever sector, or manufacturing, whichever sector. So it's important to make the point that we're literally building a new Guyana. We're using this moment in our country's history to build a far more modern and a far more prosperous Guyana. And so Budget 2024 will continue that work. And in building a new and more prosperous Guyana, we are building a Guyana in which every single Guyanese family will be better off, in which their well-being will be improved. And Budget 2024 will continue to serve that objective.
Dr. Singh, I want to thank you so much for taking the time and giving us the opportunity to have this discussion with you today.
Thank you very much, Shakwan. Always a great pleasure.